The following is a local resident producer's program. The program content is the sole responsibility of the producer and does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of CATV2, Oshkosh Community Media Services, the City of Oshkosh, or Time Warner Cable.
Hi everybody, welcome to On Oshkosh. Cheryl Hentz here, and very, very happy to be joined tonight by a guest who's been on a number of times in the past. He is Winnebago County Circuit Court Judge Scott Woldt, and we're going to be talking initially about alternatives to jail or prison, different sentences that they've been experimenting with over the last few years. And so we'll talk about that, find out its history, and talk about the kind of success that they've had, and then we'll talk about some other stuff later. So anyway, thanks for joining us. Thanks for being here. We appreciate it.
It's always a pleasure.
Yeah. You know, we have talked in the past about, for example, the STOP program, and we've talked about the drug court, which you, along with Judge Barb Hartke, kind of got the ball rolling with that. But, you know, we've got new people living in town, and for someone who maybe didn't see the show, can we just maybe do a brief history first about the drug court and, you know, why you felt it was necessary and how it got started?
Sure, I've been on the bench now 10 years, if you can believe that.
10 years already, huh?
10 years. And when I first started on the bench, you think you know before you start what it's like, but you really don't. And I thought there was a lot of drugs and those types of things in our community, but once I started on the bench, about 80% of the people that came in front of me were drugs and alcohol. So I saw that problem, and then at that time the sheriff, Mike Brooks, called me up and said, "Scott, what can we do about it? You're a new judge, you have some energy, let's see if we can do something." So we decided to take a trip over to Minnesota and went to their drug court, and we went to La Crosse, saw their drug court, and Minnesota, their alcohol court, and came back, and then we started the Safe Streets Committee. And that was kind of a forerunner in this state. It's a criminal justice coordinating committee. In fact, in the last, I think, 3 years, the Supreme Court now did a Supreme Court rule that says every county should have a criminal justice coordinating committee. So we started that, and then we started looking at what we were going to do. One thing we learned that when we went to Minnesota is with their drunk driving cases, they put all of their people on probation and make them get treatment instead of putting them in jail. And they asked why we don't put people on probation. And at that time, in 2004, you could only be put on probation for a fourth offense. Well, they started laughing at us, and their position was, on your fourth offense, haven't you kind of lost them? And you know, we couldn't dispute that.
Right.
You do at that point. We did lose them at that point. So we came back, and what we did is we met with our legislators. A couple of them were in our committee, and Carol Ressler at that time was on the committee, and she was instrumental in getting Winnebago County a pilot program. That's where we started STOP, Safe Treatment Option Program. And what we could do is put them on county-based type of supervision, not really probation, but it's supervision. And we could do that on a second and third offense, and we could give people lower jail amounts if they went through treatment and completed treatment. One of the reasons, other than getting treatment, which was obviously a good thing, one of the reasons why I wanted to do it is we were getting so many operating after revocations, people driving without their license.
Sure.
And most people don't get their license, and at that time I would always say, you go out and ride on the roads, and at least 4 of the people that you would come across would not have a driver's license.
Wow.
And that's because people get their alcohol, or they get their OWIs. No one follows up on them getting their alcohol assessment. If they don't get it, their license is revoked because they're non-compliant, or they're not compliant with their assessment. Their license is gone. They don't know what to do to get their license back, how to get it back. They just keep on getting these tickets.
And sometimes they may not even care about getting it back.
Without a doubt. And so we, in our process through this stop program, we wanted people to get their license. So we have them, part of their stop program, one of their requirements is not only get treatment, but get their alcohol assessment. Get that done. Pay the fees for that. At that time, the law was you had to pay it all up front. Well, some of these people just didn't have the money.
Yeah.
Now, today, you get on OWI first, you get a $150 fine. It'll be $1,000 by the time you're done with all the court costs. The legislature keeps on adding on more and more costs. Now, the legislature just recently, on all misdemeanor cases, there's a $200 assessment for DNA. Well, you don't use DNA on drunk driving cases or theft or a lot of cases, but they just do it to generate money. Well, and that gets just to be a phenomenal amount of money. So we get these people their license through the assessment process, get them back, and actually I was averaging, I'm just on intake again this month, I start intake. Earlier, before we started this program, we were averaging about 55 OERs, operating after revocation, a week. Now I'm just getting my cases in, we're about 15.
Wow, that's
so
good.
It's a tremendous drop on those cases because people are getting their license. And my big thing is, I take my plea at the beginning and I give them 6 months to get their license. They come back with license. I give everybody a Tootsie Pop. And you wouldn't believe the people that remember that and come back and, Judge Woldt, you gave me a Tootsie Pop. I talk to them and say, isn't it great? You don't have to worry anymore. But people are getting their assessments now. And before, statistically, we were looking at the DOT records, and with people with recidivism on drunk driving cases, it was anywhere from 44% up to 62% for second and third offenses. Now, a lot of those statistics, most statistics, are based in the criminal justice system on 3 years.
Okay.
Some will do 1 year, but they don't really tell you. Those are the ones that try to make their statistics look really good. I went to one seminar down in Madison on these types of programs, and I think it was South Carolina that was touting their great recidivism rate that they did for 3 years on all offenders ages, I think it was 20 to 21. They found that the recidivism rate went almost to 0. Well, what they started doing is every male offender that offended during that time, they would put them in prison until they were 25.
So they were juggling, they were playing with the numbers.
Yeah. When I pointed that out to them at that seminar, they didn't like that.
I suppose not.
Yeah. So with our numbers, at 2 years, we're at a little under 6, 5.8%. Even going out to 7 years, how long that program is going, we're around 11%. And when you're talking about the difference between 44%, 62%, that's a tremendous drop.
Yeah.
So the program seems to be working. And community service hours that these people do in lieu of jail time, because we're saving them some jail, the county, the taxpayers, some jail time costs in doing this. They're not sitting in jail. And these people are paying their own treatment expenses, but they're also doing community service work. And with both the STOP program and our drug court, we've done in excess of 50,000 hours of community service.
Wow.
Which is a lot of community service over the last 8 years.
Yeah. Let's talk about that for a minute, because what kind of community service are they doing? Do you go to like nonprofits and ask if they'll, work with this program, or where do you place these people?
Through the county, through Human Services, they've gone out and they've got a whole list of people that are willing to do nonprofit or accept nonprofit people. Some agencies are a little bit afraid of these types of people. Like if someone's on for a domestic, the Christine Ann Center isn't going to want them doing
Right.
their community service work there.
Yeah.
So there are some people that are a little leery of that. Some of it's on how you word it. I'll tell people there's an agency that's right across the street from the courthouse that needs a lot of community service workers, but they won't accept them if it's court ordered.
Mm-hmm.
So I say, I'm not ordering you to go there, but you could go there. And then I usually, during Christmas time, I have a bell on my bench, and I'll ring the bell and I say, get the hint. And most of them do. Most of them do. So I don't order them specifically to go to that
Yeah.
place, but I'll give them some guidance, if
Yeah.
you will.
Yeah.
But we do a lot of community service, and the people that we do it for are very grateful for the amount of community service work that our participants do. We had one individual that he just couldn't find a job, so in our drug court process, we developed a rule, because we're always changing our rules in drug court because we continue to learn. One thing we learned early on is that if you don't make these people do something, they do nothing.
Yeah.
A lot of them didn't have alarm clocks because they didn't need one. They never got up in the morning. So we started doing what was called the Rule of 40. Every week they had to do 40 hours of something. We'd do UAs 2 times a day. So people that don't work, don't have a job, had to go to the morning UA, which is between 7:45 and 8 o'clock.
And that's where their urine gets tested.
Correct.
Okay.
And they have to call a codaphone, so they don't know what color, or they have different colors. If they have to test that day or not, and if they're working, they can go later in the day. It's between 4:45 and 5 o'clock. Mm-hmm. And we have one place up in Neenah, one place here in Oshkosh that test these people for us. And we found out that as soon as we started doing that, they had to do 40 hours. They had to fill up a lot of time with community service. Within 2 weeks, everybody had a job. So now we even changed that rule once again, so it's now 20/20 if you don't have a job, where you have to do a minimum of 20 hours of community service work.
Yeah.
Because people are trying to get around that. But we had one guy that did, I think, 1,500 hours of community service during his time in drug court.
Wow.
That's a lot. That's almost a year.
That is, yeah.
Full-time job.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Now, so we touched on the recidivism a little bit, and I think we have this in a graphic too that we can put up on the screen that really spells it out for us. Can you tell us what kind of results you're getting with the program?
With drug court, it's really hard to get any type of national numbers because people play so many games with their numbers. What is for recidivism, what is a crime? Do you only look at felonies? Do you only look at misdemeanors? Do you look at ordinances? We decided the only way we can do this honestly and fairly is to include everything. Mm-hmm. Put it all in the pot. So we decided we were going to do it that way, and we went on 3 years for these people because that's what the norm is. We're trying to stay within the guidelines there to make this all fair and open. And we found that the people that didn't go through the program, their recidivism rates, and that would be like people who were terminated from our program or withdrew from the program, they're in the 70-80% for recidivism. So that's really high within 3 years to committing another crime. We found that people who have successfully completed our program, their recidivism rate was 25%. So those are huge numbers.
Yeah.
And if you look at the numbers in this, we've had, in our first 8 years in this program, we've had right around 150, 160 people in the program, and it's pretty close to 50-50, those who complete the program, those who don't. So if you have 75 people and 80% of them are committing new crimes, where the other way, 20 people, it's huge numbers.
Yeah.
So I think we are doing some good things.
Yeah. And we apparently, I don't know what happened to the graphic, but you summed it up beautifully. So let's talk about the STOP program. You sort of alluded to it before. Tell folks what that really is and the type of person who qualifies either for that or for the drug court program.
For both those programs, first thing, primarily, one thing you have to be as a resident of this county. We don't take residents from other counties because we feel our taxpayers in this county are paying for it. It should be for our citizens. Now, there's always exceptions to the rule. Outagamie County has now started a drug court as well as the STOP program, just like we have. And now we go between each other. So if it's one of our residents, that gets stopped up in Outagamie County, we'll do the supervision. They can be in our drug court down here, vice versa. If it's one of their residents that commits a crime down here in Winnebago County, we'll transfer there. So typically it's first that you have to be a resident of this county. Obviously you have to have, on a STOP program, a second OWI or a third OWI. Either one of those can be in it, but you can only be in it one time. The state law has changed now. As I said, it was a pilot program at first. Now it's statewide. That's why other counties can do it. There are about 5 counties that do the STOP type program, but they have to be convicted of the crime in this county. Then we put them in the program and they have to voluntarily agree to it. They have conditions of the program are that you pay all of your court costs, fees, you pay for your treatment, and you go to see our coordinator and that he follows through in doing the community service. The benefit that they get for being in that program from their perspective is typically what we do is we cut a third of their jail. So if it's, you can do the math, 21 days jail, they would get 7 of it off.
Yeah.
So they don't have to sit that 7 days in jail. It costs about $58 a day to house someone in jail. So that's saving the taxpayers money.
Sure.
In exchange for that 7 days off, they have to do 7 hours of community service. So not only are they saving the county money, they're paying back the county by doing the community service work. Okay. And then that program is typically for 1 year. They're in that program, and then hopefully they successfully complete it. And Mike Oleg, our coordinator, sent us some figures that I sent to you, and we've had real close to 1,000 people in it in the first 7 years of the program, and it seems like it's about 80% men and 20% women. I guess you women are lots. Not that I'm telling you anything that you didn't already know. Women are smarter than men, but it seems like our recidivism rate is really low and really doing well. Yeah. So we get a lot of kudos from around the state for the program. And it's all about getting treatment first. Sure. And that's a big thing for me. And when I started, the mantra was always get tough on crime. And I just believe it's get smart on crime. And there's a real big push now to evidence-based decision making. That's the big thing. All of our seminars are on that now that we're trying to do. And the evidence has shown that doing it the old way, just keep on hitting them harder, hasn't been working. Yeah. It hasn't worked. Yeah. So it was time to try something different. And when we saw the results of this treatment, and it's working, lowering recidivism for these people, that's when I wanted to take it statewide and do more treatment. Now, treatment can be expensive, especially when we get to the drug court. There's some inpatient treatment that we do with people, and that can get expensive. So I thought, what better way to raise some money than let's put 1 penny tax on every beer, every bottle of booze. 1 penny. Boy, legislators didn't like to hear that.
And you know, if you're not drinking a lot of beer, it really, I mean, who can't afford a penny? If you can afford the beer, you can afford the penny.
Yeah. And just that 1 penny would have raised a lot of money for treatment. And I said, instead of taking money and putting it for other things, like for OWIs, the costs are around 5 times what the dollar amount for the fine is.
Yeah.
Out of that 5 times for costs, very little of that goes to treatment. Probably around 5% goes to treatment. All the rest, some goes to the school fund. It goes to all these different things that have nothing to do with drinking and driving. So let's just do 1 penny, a 1 penny tax on all beer or all alcohol. It would be real easy to raise some money, but the lobbyists said that they would kill the legislators if they even talk about that. So I was summarily told to shut up.
But you know what? You know what? Here's the thing. It ends up, I think, costing society as a whole a hell of a lot more money because we don't have the money right now. Everybody's budgets are as tight and almost as lean as they can probably be. I'm sure some people can cut out a few things. But you know, if we just use that 1 penny, and if you're not a beer drinker, it's not going to affect you at all, except we know that we have a lot of beer drinkers around here, probably throughout the state, but so what? It's a penny, you know? So by not raising that money and being able to do some things like this, and maybe to do some educational type things, it's costing us as a society a whole lot more money.
It is.
I think.
It is. And especially right now with the heroin problem that we're having. If we had some more money for treatment, because typically the people that, and we see a lot of heroin, in fact we got a grant for a drug court. We have one person that we brought on just working with 20 to 25-year-old males with heroin addiction, and she is busy.
Wow.
It's a lot of work, and people with the heroin addiction do some bad things to their family, friends, and it's really hard. And you know, even with the Narcan these days, you know, I hear from people in a drug court saying, "Oh, we do shooting galleries where 5 people are there, 4 people shoot up, and 1 person stays there with the Narcan in case someone ODs, just to bring them back." And just to hear this type of thing, these things. And, you know, I don't know about you, but I don't like getting shots, and I see these people coming to my court and they have lines up and down their arms. And I just can't believe what they do.
No, and so voluntarily, you know. But if you're hooked, you're hooked.
And the reason why a lot of people OD on heroin is heroin can be cut down the line as it's sold down the distribution line. People want to make more money, so they'll cut it with something. And if someone gets the heroin that's not cut as much, but they're used to the cut stuff and they do the same amount, that's when they OD.
Yeah.
And we've been having some problems with fentanyl patches. It's a painkiller, but it's the same thing as, it's an opiate, the same as heroin. And these fentanyl patches are supposed to be a 72-hour release. Well, they're grinding up these fentanyl patches with 72 hours worth of slow release heroin, if you will, opiate, and shooting it up all at once. And they're ODing because of that.
Wow. See, you're making my wheels turn here.
Yeah.
Your Honor, I'm thinking about all these, I'm making all kinds of little notes here on other things that I want to talk about. But when we think about, you know, alternatives to jail or prison, there was something that Chicago has, and I want to try and find it here. Basically, it's In Your Shoes kind of program. And yeah, it's in My Shoes, and it's the In My Shoes program in Chicago, where they try to work with adolescents to have them talk with people who have been convicted of various crimes, and who try to convince them that this is not the way to go. You know, and apparently it's working fairly well. You know, you're never going to save everybody, but if you can save some, then it's worth it. Yeah. Have you heard of that program there?
I haven't heard of it, but with the heroin task force going on here in Winnebago County, specifically in Oshkosh, we have 4 pillars that are working on that. One of the prevention ones is dealing with kids. And our goal is to start really early, and the DARE programs in elementary schools start talking about these things. because I think everyone is, and the evidence has established that the earlier we can catch people, the better.
Yeah.
So are we trying to do that? Yes, but a lot of this stuff comes down to money. You know, even when I've gone to a couple of the meetings for the heroin task force, they just haven't had bad times of the day when I'm in court. But one thing I learned is, because a lot of people come up to me and say, they know I run the drug court. My neighbor, my cousin, my nephew, my son is hooked on drugs. What do I do? And that was always a hard, I run the drug court, but I really don't. We have people, social workers, our coordinator that do all of that. I really don't.
Yeah.
So I really didn't know how to answer that really well. And I would usually be sending them to people that are on our drug court team for more information. One thing I found out, someone said, have you ever tried calling 211 on the phone? And I just, that doesn't work. So we're sitting there, Pillar Group is sitting there at Options Treatment Center, or at Solutions, the Recovery Club. We got on the phone, put them on speakerphone, and we called 211, and the person that was talking was play acting like they had a relative that needed help. And that person was fantastic. They asked all of the right questions. They found out if they had insurance, and they were directing them where to go, and they got great information. So now when people ask me that question, or if you have issues, 211, it really works.
And is it just about drugs, or is it any, you know, whatever goes?
Yeah,
it runs
whatever.
the gamut.
They just have people that know, and they have, I guess they have a huge computer system, and they ask all the right questions, and it was fantastic. I was very impressed.
So just simply 211, whether you've got a drug problem, an alcohol problem, suicidal.
Yes.
I'm sure that they're,
Yep.
you know, in the program that they're using, I suspect you ask a certain question, and then you punch in the answer, and that flips you to another page in their program, probably.
Yeah, and it's Winnebago County based, so they're getting you to help and treatment here in our community. So it's not a nationwide thing. It's just Winnebago County. So it's very helpful. The information was fantastic. I know it sounds like I'm blowing their horn. It's probably because I am, because I was impressed.
It sounds like it's worth blowing the horn for. 211. Anything else on either the STOP program or the drug court that you want to touch on before we talk about some other alternatives to jail or
For
prison?
drug court, to get in that program, once again, you have to be a resident of this county. You have to have a felony conviction. Now, the felony does not have to be a drug felony. A lot of the ones we see are uttering, where the son steals mom or dad's checkbook and goes out and writes $3,000 worth of checks on mom and dad's.
Isn't that just forgery?
Yeah. You call it uttering. Uttering a document is forgery. Same thing. And they get, a lot of them get that, or they'll be doing burglary. They steal someone's electronics and pawn them. And then the pawn company has to call up the police, and they all get caught. But they keep on doing it. But they get the felony, and then they have to go through an assessment with our coordinator, and they have to meet the DSM-5, I think it is now.
Yeah, that's right. It just became 5 like in the last month, I think.
Yeah. They have to meet the definition for being addiction, having an addictive personality. So they do that, and then they have to voluntarily be in the program. But it has to be a non-violent felony. If they have any past violent felonies, and there's a statute that defines what those are, they can't be in the program.
Okay.
And then we typically put them in, typically I think our average is around 15 months to get through it. There are some that have done it in 1 year, but that's the minimum. And some have gone 2.5 years. But the way the process works is phase 1 is 60 days. They have to be 60 days clean. During that time, they have to come to drug court every Friday. We do it at 2 o'clock, either myself or Judge Key. They have to do UAs, call up every day on the phone. They have to go to at least 4 recovery meetings, AA, NA, those types of meetings. They have to meet with their caseworker, meet with their social worker, meet with their probation officer, and do at least 40 hours of something.
Okay.
They do that and they're clean for 60 days. They can apply to phase up. They phase up in their phase 2. Phase 2 is for 120 days clean, and it's a new time period. It doesn't count the old stuff, the old 60 days.
So it starts over.
Yeah. So it's a new 60 days, and they have to get points in these process also. Community service work, 5 hours is 1 point. Phase 1, you have to get 10 points. Phase 2, you have to get 5 points. Have to have a full-time job. You come to drug court every other week, and then you have to go to at least 3 meetings a week.
Okay.
So we kind of pull back the reins a little bit. Actually, we've been seeing that phase 2 is the hardest one to get through, because they get through phase 1 because we're there all the time.
Sure.
Phase 2, when we pull back a little bit, they're not used to that.
Freedom.
Yeah, exactly. And it's hard for them. Then once they get through that, they go in phase 3, which is 6 months. They have to be clean for 6 months. At that
And again, it starts over?
Yep.
Okay.
Starts over, and then they're still doing testing during that time. Their colors will change, so they might not be called as often. And we, at that point, they have to go to 2 meetings a week, and then after 30 or halfway through that phase, they have to start working with the mentor and alumni groups,
Okay.
and then start working with them. When they do it, after that, we have a graduation.
Excellent. Now, what if someone either says, you know what, I'll just sit in prison or in jail. I don't want to do this. It's too tough. It's easier to just sit in jail. Or they get bounced out of the program. I mean, obviously, if they say, I don't want to do this, I want jail, well, then jail is the result of that. What if they get bounced out of the program? Is it still jail then?
Yeah,
Or is there some additional penalty?
the way that we do it is most times we'll do an imposed and stayed sentence. Okay. So if it's imposed and stayed, so if I say you're going to go to prison for 2 years and 3 years in additional confinement, if they quit, say no mas, or they get terminated from the program and they get revoked from probation, they go right to prison. They don't come back in front of any of us.
Okay.
Now, there's the difference between termination and withdrawal. People who just say I quit, they sign off saying I quit. If I sentenced them, but I didn't impose a state, they would come back to me and I would sentence them.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if someone's getting terminated from the program, but they don't want to be terminated, they're fighting it, if I sentence them, Judge Key will do the termination hearing.
Okay.
And then it's basically a 2-part question for the termination hearing, and that is there anything else we can do for this person? And is what they're doing harm the integrity of the program? If those questions are yes, then they're terminated from the program. The reason we do that way is because we want to, it's kind of a due process thing. Mm-hmm. If I'm going to be sentencing them, I don't want to hear all that stuff
right.
at the termination hearing, and vice versa with Judge
Sure.
Key. So that's the way we did it, just to save these people, having the judge that's actually sentencing them hearing all this bad stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Any other kinds of alternatives that you're either looking at or that the county has implemented?
Well, right now, there was an evidence-based decision-making summit that the National Director of State Courts, some nationwide thing put on here in Winnebago, or in Madison, and myself, I think there were probably 7 of us that went, and Gordon Hentz was one of them at the program also. And one thing we learned is that that we should maybe in the legal profession or in the judicial system be taking the Hippocratic Oath. First, do no harm. Because some of these things that we do with people causes harm. Mm-hmm. If someone is a first-time offender that has never been in trouble and they meet a 3-part proxy test, we ask them certain questions. If they meet that and we bring them into the system and make them do things in the system, the odds are that we're going to make that person worse.
Mm-hmm. Because?
For instance, if you have a husband and wife that have been married for 35 years and they get in an argument one day and someone calls the police. One of them gets arrested, one of them gets a disorderly conduct. The norm used to be we would send them through a treatment process. Let's say it's him that got charged. And that treatment process was a 44-week program of 2 hours for each night you have to go. And if you miss any, you get kicked out.
Mm-hmm.
Very expensive, very time-consuming. The amount, the bitterness that would arise from that person having to go through that, bringing that back to the family, actually harmed the family and made things a lot worse. And there are a lot of studies out now that talk about how we can do that harm by doing too much. So what we're trying to do now is with first-time offenders, people like with the first-time marijuana offense, or somebody's doing a small theft, criminal damage to property, retail theft, some underage drinking at the university, those types of things. The officers and all of the law enforcement officers throughout the county are getting on board with this, and we're in the process of developing this program. We haven't named it yet, so if you can think of a good name, let me know.
I'll put my thinking cap on for that one.
And what we'll do is we're going to ask them these 3 questions, and if they meet that 3-question proxy test, at that time what the officer is going to do is they're going to offer them this program. And in this program, what they would have to do is we're in the process of putting together a videotape that we're going to put on the, I don't know, they probably don't call them videotapes these days, whatever they call them, DVDs or something on the internet, a website.
Streamlining, DVDs.
It's going to be through the county webpage. And they come on there and we'll explain the program to them. And it's going to be the clerk of courts is going to talk in it, the sheriff and the district attorney. Mm-hmm. And they're going to talk about all of the things that can harm them by getting a record. Because that is huge these days. Mm-hmm. You know, you've heard of CCAP?
Sure.
Who hasn't heard of CCAP? Most people have heard of CCAP. The first thing, if anyone ever reads before they hit I agree, it says that you're not going to use this if you're a landlord against people. You're not going to use this for people to buy vehicles, rent houses, sell houses to people. You're not going to do any of that. But we all know that they do. And I understand that. But so people with these small-time offenses don't understand the ramifications of that being out there.
Right.
Because let's say you even have a serious crime, go to a jury trial, you're found not guilty. It's still on CCAP.
Right. It's still there.
And people don't usually click on to find out what happened. They see your name, they see the charge, you've been convicted. Even though you're found not guilty, even though it's been dismissed,
you're convicted in their mind.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Something that you just said, you know, about you're not supposed to use it for this and not supposed to use it for that. Okay, now, I was a landlord at one time. I was a landlord for like 19 years. I did look at those things. There's no other way to really screen people. And, you know, I mean, if people had some financial problems, well, everybody's had financial problems at one time or another in their lives. I didn't hold that against them. But I was really very reluctant to rent to them if they had, you know, criminal damage, a prior eviction, criminal damage to property, especially if it was a rental property, you know, things like that, or more serious crimes that they had in fact been convicted of. And each person was different. I didn't have a pat standard rule that said, okay, if they have 2 of these or more than 3 of these, they're out. I talked to the person and got a good feel for them. But yeah, I certainly used it to screen people, either in or out.
Yeah,
and you have to. How else are you supposed to judge people?
I don't disagree with that, but I'm in the judiciary, not the legislature, and they make the rules, and that's the rule they made. Yeah.
Well, then why have CCAP? You know, I mean, if you really think about it, then what purpose does CCAP serve? Then it's kind of a stupid tool, really.
Actually, CCAP was developed just solely for the court system. Mm-hmm. But then when they saw how much information, the legislature saw how much information was there, that's when they did the circuit court automation, and they made it so the public could get that information too.
Yeah. And as a journalist, I used it all the time.
You want to see when court dates are.
Well,
so
of
you
course.
can come to court.
Yeah, that's
What happened
right.
at court?
Yeah, exactly. But, I was one of the people who did click all the way through to see what the end result was. And if I didn't ever understand it, I'd call a lawyer friend of mine or a judge friend of mine, and I'd say, what does this really mean?
Yeah.
Because I wanted to make certain that as I'm writing a story, I've got the facts straight, so my publisher and I don't get sued. But CCAP was one of the things I had written down here. What are your thoughts on CCAP? I mean, do you think it's a good thing overall, or should it be kind of pulled back?
I think that if someone's found not guilty, I think their case should be totally removed from CCAP.
Okay. I would agree with that, yeah.
What's the sense of it being on there if someone's found not guilty? I think it should be removed.
Yeah.
I think courts should be given discretion after a certain period of time to expunge records on misdemeanor cases. So, for instance, I've had people that have gone through VIP, volunteers in probation. Let's say they had a disorderly conduct when they were 21 because they got in a fight at a bar. And that's the only thing they've ever had. They've gone through VIP, they've completed everything on VIP. What we do then is we dismiss that charge once they successfully complete it. Now that's on CCAP. And this, let's say 10 years later, this person is going for a job and they want to be in law enforcement. I think the charge has been dismissed. They successfully completed their sentence, and it's 10 years old. I think we can comply with victim rights, have people come in if they want to say anything. And I think judges could make a decision as to whether or not it's harmful to the community if we allow that person to expunge their record and then be able to take that off their record.
Sure.
Because they're actually based upon age. If you're under 25 and it's your first offense, a lot of people don't know this, but you can do a special disposition on people where if they successfully complete their crime, the record is expunged. Those people get it taken away.
So in those cases, it's pulled off CCAP?
It is.
And don't some things just drop off CCAP after a while anyway? Really?
No.
I've seen people who have had speeding tickets or running a red light, citation, things like that, and it's then you search for them and it's just no longer there.
Unless they change their name.
Well, maybe, I don't know.
I get a lot of people doing that.
I'm sure you see that quite a bit. I want to go back to this DNA thing that you had mentioned before, that they're charging to collect DNA and that it's a way to make money. Is it maybe also a way to have people's DNA in the system? Do they take it even if they already have it?
No.
Okay.
They don't even take it on the misdemeanor charges.
Okay.
So you're just paying the fee. They're not taking your DNA.
Well then, yeah, okay, then I would say that's a ripoff. But if you're going to charge them for it, then take it. That way you have the DNA on file, so that if a more serious crime...
Too much work. Too much work.
Well, I would say it's too much work to pull it out of someone's bank account or whatever. How about drunk driving? We touched on that with some of these programs. Do you think this state is getting tougher on drunk driving, or are we still, in some ways, the laughing stock of the country for being a little lax?
I think we are, because we're the only state on a first-time offense where it's not criminal.
So we are lax.
I don't think we're lax, but I think the other 48 states think we're lax. Once again, I don't think giving someone a criminal record or giving them jail on a first offense is the answer. I think it's treatment. And we're moving towards more treatment in this state. And I think because of that, our state, in fact, whenever there are federal grants that are open for states that use evidence-based decision making and use treatment for all of their criminals. Usually they go based upon how the record of that state and what they do. Our state usually gets picked. So we get a lot of money based upon what we do for people. And that's very helpful. So
Sure.
I think perception-wise, we are within the community. I think within the legislature, executive branch, judiciary, people that know our state and what we do, I think they think of us as a leader. Now, one of the things I always say is it's a cultural thing with respect to drunk driving in Wisconsin. If people weren't meant to drink and drive, there's an easy solution. Outlaw parking lots at bars.
Although that wouldn't, well, yeah, okay.
Can you think of a bar
Yeah.
that doesn't have a parking
Yeah,
lot?
that's true.
How do you get there? How do
Yeah.
you get home?
Yeah.
Those parking lots aren't full at the end of
Yeah.
the night.
That's true. That's true. You're still going to have a lot of public intoxication, though.
Well, at least they're not harming other people.
That's true. You know, we recently saw Colorado become one of the second or third states in the union to legalize marijuana for something other than just medical use. What are your thoughts on that? Either as a judge or as a person or both?
Because of what I've seen with marijuana in our drug court, I am vehemently opposed to it. The arguments always are, well, you never heard of anyone smoking pot and killing somebody, but you do with alcohol, and alcohol is legal. Well, I think that's a specious argument because a lot of people don't smoke pot and drive cars. Now, I've had cases. I've had a case up in Neenah where a mother was smoking marijuana and blew a stop sign and their child got ejected and died. So I've had those cases with marijuana. I have seen people in our drug court, and the people that are using marijuana are always, it's not a gateway drug, I'm just doing it to relax. They have every excuse in the world. But after we get them clean for 4 months, because it usually takes about 4 months for their head to come back after marijuana use, they are totally different people. The hair trigger people have from marijuana use, just the anger, people who have prolonged marijuana use are mean people. And I've seen it a lot, and I think it would hurt our society if we allowed marijuana use.
Yeah.
It's
I
my own
disagree.
personal- I know, that's okay.
You know, but on the other hand, you know, I think it depends on, you know, where these drugs are coming from and, you know, how pure they are, or how, you know, like you were talking about before, how, you know, cut they are, or what they're cut with or whatever. You know, when I was growing up, I mean, you didn't have to worry about it. It was pretty pure. And you didn't have to worry about it being laced with something or whatever. And now just a few weeks ago in Colorado, a guy who had never had any run-ins with the law other than maybe a speeding ticket, he just flipped out. He'd been smoking. All of a sudden, a nice family man, good, clean-cut family, he was smoking a joint, or I think he ate a cookie too. And the next thing you know, he's handing his gun to his wife saying, "Kill me, the world's coming to an end, blah, blah, blah." And, you know, she called 911 for help.
Yeah.
And it took something like 13 or 14 minutes for them to respond.
Oh.
And in that amount of time, he turned the gun on her and shot her in the head and killed her. And, you know, so I see both sides of it. I guess I'd be more in favor of it being legalized than outlawed, but you know, you have to know where these things are coming from.
And, you know, the one thing I do agree with, it's the arguments are pretty much the same as alcohol. You know, can it be safe? I believe so. Can alcohol be safe? I believe so. Can alcohol be dangerous? Yes. Can marijuana be dangerous? Yes. So I struggle with the fact that it's a choice when you're going too far with things, and how much we want Big Brother to be involved in making those decisions for us. I understand that.
Yeah.
It's just I've seen so many negative consequences from it that I just wish, I hope personally, that it doesn't happen.
Yeah. I want to talk about, what your thoughts are on the prison industrial complex. I think most people have heard of the military industrial complex, where it's just becoming a big business, and that's kind of what the, the prison industrial complex is too. Do you feel that way? Do you feel it's kind of becoming big business, or is it just a necessary tool of the times?
Well, judges have to go through a prison tour every 6 years. And my first term, I went to Oshkosh Correctional and went through the prison system there and saw everything. And I thought it was really strange that it was more like dorms. The inmates, there's 2 inmates in a room, and it's like a dorm room,
yeah.
Wood furniture, and they each have their key to their room. And then the last tour I went to, because I wanted to see the other side, I went to Waupun. And Waupun is a lot different.
Yeah.
And when I went through that prison, I was amazed that the cells were about 7 feet long and about 5 feet wide, and 2 people living in there. And they're in those cells, I think it was like 15 hours a day.
That would make me mean.
Oh,
forget about pot making
yeah.
you mean. That would make me mean.
Yeah. And I've had some customers that were there, and it was nerve-wracking when I was there, because they all have their names outside their cells.
Yeah.
And when I was reading names, and I wasn't putting my back towards those cells.
Yeah.
And when we do that, I purposely dress down so people don't recognize me. But I don't see the money-making part of it so much in our state. What I see is that people are very territorial with their money,
yeah.
with their budgets, and it's so hard to get people to put money towards treatment.
Yeah.
They'll put it towards other things, like the evidence-based decision-making, as I've been talking about, has shown that boot camp is probably the worst thing in the world. Doesn't work. Yet we spend a lot of money and we keep on doing it.
Yeah, yeah.
I think what the Chief Justice told me once, if you ever have a program that shows that it doesn't work, declare victory and move on. I think it's time to declare victory for boot camp and move on, because it has shown that it doesn't work.
Sure. In so many states in the Union, prisons and jails are privately run. We don't have that here, of course. What are your thoughts on privately run institutions? Do you think they're better than publicly run ones, or vice versa?
I think the only way that it would be better is if you had some public accountability, that everything was very open.
Oh, yeah.
If not, you're going to get people who are trying to save money by not doing what they're supposed to do, or contracted to do. That takes me back to the old days when the Constitution said the sheriff is responsible for feeding jail inmates. And the way it used to be is the sheriff would feed them by their wives. In the 1800s, their wife would make food, bring it, they'd get reimbursed for that. County board would set a per diem for each meal. It got to the point where that was becoming a very big business for sheriffs, and they were making a lot of money. The law changed.
Yeah.
So that wasn't open.
Yeah. What do you think of, and everybody's got an opinion about him, Sheriff Joe Arpaio out in Maricopa County, Arizona?
I'm always concerned about people who call press conferences and like to talk about things. See, and I believe that my sentences should speak for themselves. I don't go out and just throw a press conference and say I'm going to do all these things. Now, some things that he does are evidence-based and they work.
Yeah.
Some things he does, like to make blanket statements about people coming from Mexico coming up to his area and what he's going to do with these people, I think that's totally wrong.
Yeah.
That's totally outside of his jurisdiction.
Yeah.
He has nothing to do with what the laws are for immigration. That's federal,
Right.
not state or county.
Yeah.
So,
But then the media actually seeks him out too.
They do.
And sometimes I don't know if it's him, you know, Sheriff Joe calling the press conferences, or if it's the media calling him up and saying, hey, you know, he was just on TV yesterday. There was this pit bull who had torn up this kid's face, but this kid came into the pit bull's yard and tried to take the dog's food away. It wasn't even his yard. The kid just wandered into it. So anyway, the judge spared the dog's life, but he's going to be living at Sheriff Joe's jail. And so, you know, you put him in a dog sanctuary and don't let him be adopted out, but why put him in a jail? I mean, that. But anyway, so he was on TV yesterday talking about how little Mickey the pit bull is going to live the rest of his life and so on and so forth. We've only got about 2.5 minutes or so left, but I want to touch on one thing. You know, I'm a news junkie, and there was a judge, don't remember where this was, and you maybe even heard of it. It was not in Wisconsin, thank God. Just a couple weeks ago, this woman had just brutally murdered this guy and gutted him like a deer, and it was awful. And as he was sent, well, the victims gave their victim impact statements, and she's just sitting there rolling her eyes, twiddling her thumbs. Are you done? Is that all? Are we finished here? You know, and the judge was just getting more and more ticked off. So when he sentenced her, you know, he said, if we had the death sentence or the death penalty in this state, you'd be on your way to the chair right now. But I can't sentence you to that, but I hope you die in prison. And his voice got louder and louder. He really came under a lot of criticism for that. What do you feel about, just real quickly, a judge making that kind of pronouncement from the bench? I didn't think it was that bad, personally, given her attitude.
I have given someone life in prison, and I've told them during that sentencing that because of people like you, it makes me rethink whether the death penalty is a good thing or not. So I was listening to the radio the other day, and some news people were talking about how someone, they thought they were off air, but they weren't, and they said some off-colored things. People sometimes are under so much pressure, so much strain, that they'll say things just to lighten up the mood, just for your own mental health.
Yeah.
To look at things in a vacuum, just a little piece of it, and say, oh, that was terrible, and not knowing everything that happened. There are certain times when I have cases where I have 50 cases, and they're just, people are doing such dumb things. Yesterday I had traffic court. You wouldn't believe the cases I had. At the end of the day, was I getting more short? Absolutely. Do I try to fight that? I end up, when I realize I'm doing, I usually give them better sentences. So I try to fight that, but it's difficult.
Yeah. Well, and that judge might have just been so fed up with the whole thing and her attitude, and, you know, felt that he was maybe speaking on behalf of all the victims, too.
Yeah.
You know, so anyway, Scott, thanks for being here.
Thanks
it's
for having
always
me.
a real pleasure.
It is.
It is.
It is.
And we did, you know, try to have Judge Key on. She was unavailable tonight, but she said she'd be happy to come back another time. So
She will.
We'll have both of you back at some point. So anyway, thanks again. And thanks to you for joining us. We will see you next time. Until then, take good care. Keep your eye on us. We've got our eye on Oshkosh.